Go ahead, call the meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, our first order of business before we get started is we need to get the election of officers, and the reason I'm starting the meeting is because we need to elect the first position, which is the president of the school board. This is our reorganization meeting. So at this time, I would entertain nominations for president for the school board.
Chairperson Pro Tem.
Yes, that'll work just fine. Yes,
I'd
Sue?
like to nominate James Johnson for president.
Okay. Other nominations? Other nominations? Other nominations? All right, I'll go ahead and close the nominations. Now, I would entertain a motion for a voice vote by acclamation, since we only have one nomination. So this wouldn't require us to go to a secret ballot. So since we have one nomination for president, I would entertain a motion for Jamie Johnson to be the board president.
So moved.
And second?
Second.
Okay. I do not believe it requires any discussion on that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign? All right. Mr. President, here's your gavel back.
Thank you. And thank you, board members, for your support and confidence throughout the last 5 years, and look forward to the next year. All right. Next up, we have nominations for vice president.
Mr. President, I'd like to nominate Bruce Hanson.
Okay, we have a nomination for Bruce.
Mr. President, I'd like to nominate Heather Luglin.
All right, we have a nomination for Heather. Is there any other nominations? Oh, and I guess one point of order, too, is to make sure we ask, Bruce, do you accept the nomination?
I do.
All right, and Heather, do you accept the nomination?
I do.
All right, so we have two accepted nominations. I think I've called for nominations once, calling nominations again a second time. Any nominations? Third request, any further nominations for vice president? Hearing none, we will now distribute ballots. And pursuant to our procedure, actually our policy, requires a majority vote. We have all 7 board members here, so that means 4 votes.
Bailing out. I think.
I did last fall,
Must have been April.
whenever yeah, after, I can't. Not that much, but I did a lot of social media. I guess some songs, yes, we tried to give me like 4. Tried to give me like 4 signs.
By a majority of the vote, Bruce Hanson will be the next vice president of the board.
Okay, moving on to treasurer. I'll accept nominations for treasurer.
Oops, other way.
Mr. President, I'd like to nominate Heather Loughlin for treasurer.
Okay. Heather, do you accept?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right, we have one treasurer nomination. Is there any others? Calling for other nominations a second time. And a third. Any other nominations? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to elect Heather Loughlin treasurer by acclamation.
I move that we elect her by.
Second.
All right. It's been moved in second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, Heather is now treasurer of the Hudson School District Board. And then last, we have nominations for clerk. Same procedure as the other offices. I'll call for nominations 3 times. This is first call for nominations.
I nominate Carrie Whitaker for clerk.
Carrie, do you accept? Yes. Okay. So we have an accepted nomination, calling for any further nominations. This is second call. Any other nominations? This is the third and final call. Any other nominations for clerk? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to elect Carrie Whitaker clerk by acclamation.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion passes. That concludes election of board members. Now we move on to recognition. Sandy, turn it over to you.
Yes, and Mr. President, if we could, I'm not seeing Joey here yet. I talked to his dad just a few days ago, so if we could move ahead and then watch and see if he still arrives, please.
Absolutely. So now we'll move on in the agenda. Any requests to speak? Okay, we have no request to speak on non-action items, so we'll move to superintendent reports. Turn it over to Nick.
All right, so I'm on. So first one I want to talk about is the upcoming workshop with Drew Howick. So I'm going to pass this. He just sent this today. This is the agenda or sample agenda, and make sure everybody feels like this is kind of the plan. But if you look at the objectives for the 28th board meeting, the 3 main objectives is that people will leave with an increased understanding of the characteristics of a high-performing board. We'll look at collective commitments. Sometimes people are called group norms or things like that. The board is going to kind of come up with what they consider their group norms or their collective commitments that they'll each support, and then also then identify what topics will be on the agenda for the 8th, the retreat on Saturday morning, the 8th. And so a couple things that Drew wanted me to touch on, and Jamie and I have had a couple calls with him, is everybody has the good governance. Yeah, Good Governance is a choice book. He just reminded people to review chapter 2, because I know we started reading. I think we did like the first 4 chapters. That was back in February, so it's been a few months. And you can kind of see what some of the indicators are going to be. And then he is going to be sending a norms of collaboration form or sheet, just kind of a reading that you guys will be able to you'll be able to do ahead of time to the meeting. On the back side, you can just kind of see these are just some of the notes. That's why I didn't attach this to the agenda. It's just we'll get the handouts to you guys ahead of time, the desired behaviors. And so one of the things that Drew talks about is coming to the meeting kind of ready to go, have some things in mind of the desired characteristics so people aren't kind of winging it as we go, as we kind of work through some of those components. And then the chapter 2 reminder that I already kind of talked about. So any questions kind of about as far as the first start? Because the biggest piece, I think, is as we went through with the book was roles and responsibilities and kind of common how we're going to operate. So I guess I shouldn't say we, how the board's going to operate. So other questions or anything about this? And I know, Sue, you had a handout that you put at everybody's table. It kind of feeds right into this. And this would be a great time because I think it would fall definitely under our workshop that's coming up. If you or Bob wanted to touch on the workshop that you were at up at CISA.
Okay, well, this is like the 4th time, probably the 2nd time for Bob that we've attended the responsibilities, duties, and powers of the board members. And so I was just a little paparazzi out there, and I took photographs of 4 of the slides. And I took these 4 slides because they were relating to our previous discussion on good governance. And so they just kind of resonated with me. And also, I picked up copies of the entire presentation, but, you know, if you want one of those, I can give them to you another time. But I think this can just be your own self-reading.
Bob, I don't know if you had anything you want to add?
Sue was taking way more notes than I was, yes, and pictures, so, but yes, it was a nice discussion, on the way back from, about, how even though she's been through it so many times, it really, you get something each time. And, it was a quiet crowd this time. There were not many questions, which the first one I attended, there were a lot of questions and a lot of, you know, somewhat scary questions, but I'm glad that they were asked, so, good time.
Yeah, and thanks, Sue, for, you know, again, providing this. I wanted to be able to go to that, but I had a conflict. So I thank you guys for taking the time to go to that. It's always good for us to start with the basics, and hopefully we can find ways of improving as a board with Drew's leadership. Is there any other questions for Nick on the agenda or what we're going to be trying to accomplish? He's got it kind of parceled out there, and hopefully have a very timely adjournment there, 8:30, which is a little early for us on our work sessions, but,
I can have him add to it if you'd like, if,
Yeah.
you know, it's not.
you know, our last
not
work
late.
session was 4.5 hours and not just 3, so.
Not for everybody.
Yeah, it does start a little early for those people who like to eat, so,
Yes.
yeah, eat supper. All right.
All right, the other piece I just wanted to touch on, end of the year assessments, we were talking about this in cabinet and some of the things that we have going on in the district. You know, all of our different grade levels that take the forward exam, that's been taken care of, that was in April. We have kids taking, MAPS testing at basically what, grades 1st through 8th, Dave?
Yeah,
Or is it going to
end
9?
of kindergarten,
Okay.
and then up to the fall of 9th grade.
Fall of 9th. So they're in the middle of doing that. That's quite a process because all these tests are now online, and they're all so there's a lot of different moving pieces when you're trying to, you know, administer tests to a few thousand kids, making sure the internet stays up and things like that. And so, thankful to our IT department, and Jen's actually here off in the back there, who runs the IT, and Dave also. So those big components. We also AP testing started last week. If you have any high school age kids at home and they're in AP classes, that started last week and will continue through this week as well. And then what happens in those AP classes, because we still have 4 weeks of school left, is there'll be a lot of different enrichment activities, things that teachers maybe couldn't get covered at the level or depth they wanted to cover because of the pace of getting through everything with AP. So they definitely will capitalize on that time. And we did just find out also with our spring forward exams, we probably will not get data on that until July, school-wide data until July. And so that's when we'll be able to populate a lot of the sessions in the district scorecards. We do have some MAPS data that we'll get into those scorecards, probably be able to start getting that in probably in the next 3 or 4 weeks as soon as all the maps close and work through some of those components. So looking forward to by the end of the summer, we should have all of our assessment data in, getting those different components in. And that's been one of the reasons why when we went through my evaluation a month ago, we didn't go through the goals yet, because one of the goals is tied to the forward exam data. And so in an effort not to have you sit and talk about something that we don't have the data on yet, I thought we'd wait until we get the data on those things, and then we can have that discussion. So, any questions about end of the year assessments that we have going on right now? The semester exams at the high school, those schedules have gone out. They've made it, and actually with the extra snow day, it played out pretty well because the high school now has semester tests Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then obviously the last day of school being on Wednesday. So it worked out quite well for us on a lot of different fronts, but we're just, you know, trying to get the year wrapped up. But right now it's kind of the assessment is a big piece of what we're doing right now, kind of seeing how things went and engaging our progress. So, questions?
Any questions for Nick on the end of year assessments? All right. Hearing none, we move on with the agenda, and we have cybersecurity. And I assume turn over to Dave, who may have some assistance with this one.
Yes, a lot of assistance. And Nick kindly said before about technology, and Dave also, which really isn't true because Jen does an amazing job and is quite a leader for us in the area of technology. And tonight she's going to talk about cybersecurity and data privacy, which as board members you have an understanding of because there have been a few attempted hacks of a few of you. So that's just the sort of thing we're trying to put an end to. Jen has been an amazing leader with this, not only in the district, but at the state level too. And she's taken this challenge of increasing our cybersecurity, she's taken it head on and done an amazing job. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jen Lotze.
All right, well, we're going to talk just very briefly about not only cybersecurity, but also data privacy. So cybersecurity is really the umbrella that data privacy, data security, all of those topics really fall into. So if you hear that information on the news, that's really where everything comes from. So, but again, today our topics are really around what is cybersecurity, why does it really matter to us as a district, and then also what are we as a district doing about it. So.
He's being hacked. So.
No. No. So just a little bit of background information. So if you've watched the news or read the newspaper at all, or online news, whatever you prefer, phishing has really, really escalated quite quickly. They've increased 36% over the last around 2018. And we're also seeing phishing websites have grown by 220%. And what these really are, these are websites that look and act and feel like legitimate websites. One that is constantly being compromised is Apple. So if you are an Apple user and you want to download iTunes on your computer, there are so many different malicious websites that look very legitimate and feel very legitimate and prompt you to download the current version of iTunes. You might not notice that this website is fake or phishing, but by downloading that program onto your computer, it essentially opens up your computer or your network or your account credentials to the rest of the world. With that, over 400 organizations, this is school districts and businesses, are targeted by phishing attacks on a daily basis. And 90 to 95% of these attacks are caused by a phishing attack. So where, the person, they're reaching out to someone intentionally to say, I'm going to reach out to you, person in the chair, and I'm going to try to phish you and then get your credentials or get your access or anything like that. And additionally, there's something called pretexting, which, as you know, some of you have been privy to. Basically what this is it's not actually a malicious email in and of itself. It just contains basic information looking for you to respond to it. In that it'll say, hey, do you have a second for a call? Or can we talk about this initiative or something like that? They're just looking for a response. There's nothing in there that is, there's no links, there's no downloads, there's no executable files, but really it's just looking for you to reply. What this person, this hacker or harmful person is looking to do is just get some intel on you. So like my name is Jennifer, but I might sign my email Jen. So now they know that you can call me Jen or Jennifer. They will also look at my email signature to see what I title myself, what are my certifications, what are the things that are there so they can become more familiar with me. So then if they decide to come after my credentials or come after my account, they have some of that firsthand knowledge of how I respond, what is my font, etc. So it's really, even though those are harmless, they're part of a larger plan. Okay. So as you can see, this is a map that is taken, it's a pretty popular map that if you've ever talked about cybersecurity, you probably see this. These are each different pin is a legitimate attempt or a cyber incident, what we would call, or a breach or an attack. There's lots of language and each thing really means something different, but generally these are all cyber incidents of K-12 districts. Now keep in mind that while there are 450 incidents, now this is as of last week, so might have changed a little bit, there are 450 incidents since January of 2016. But keep in mind that these are only the incidents that get reported to state organizations. So as we're going through this process, I was meeting with other state leaders last week, as Dave mentioned, and many of us sitting around the table were like, people had indicated, yes, we've had a cyber incident or we've had an issue, but the state was unaware of it. So these are merely just the incidents that are reported through the state or nationally. There's different places to route that. And there's all different types. Okay. And then this is really the why of why we're doing this. So ultimately, it's our job as districts, professionals and teachers and IT and administrators to protect our students and also protect our staff. So this is just a couple of examples of what we're seeing. You know, these are those news titles, and you'll have access to the slides after. Each of these is a different article of a mainstream breach or cyber incident that has occurred. Why else are we doing this? There's also national, federal legal requirements. You've probably heard of them, like FERPA, COPA, SEPA, all these privacy things, and then also some cyber new legislation coming down that we're starting to hear about that's coming federally and through the state. Okay. So the most important thing, what are we as a district doing to not only protect our infrastructure, that cybersecurity, our infrastructure through cybersecurity, but also our student and staff data, because as you guys probably know, human data is very valuable. We know this, we know that like our children's data has high value, so we want to protect that. So as a district, we're going through, and many of the cabinet members have been a part of these cybersecurity audits, where we're working to test our system, get feedback from the outside, really help us to learn where we might have some vulnerabilities, so then we can beef up our security and make it stronger. We're also doing security vulnerability testing, which basically just tests. It simulates an attack so we can find out where we have some of those weaknesses, so we can also repair some of those. We have increased network monitoring to protect against malicious intruders. We already have a firewall. That's something that every district has to have, but this is really on top of that. It makes our firewall a lot smarter to those who are trying to get in. Around staff area, we're really doing more training activities for staff around not only phishing and how to spot a fish, but also how to secure student data and protect against student data. So we're doing training in both of those areas, and we're also, hate to say it, we're phishing our staff. So we, on a regular basis, we phish our staff and are testing them to see, are they falling victim to some of these emails? The ones that we're phishing them with look very real. There's a screenshot in the presentation if you want to take a look. It could be FedEx, it could be HR, it could be IT, it could be any of these things, and it really simulates what that might feel like. Some of them are even like that pre-texting that we talked about before, where it just asks you to reply. What happens with that training, especially on the phishing side, is if you do click on one of those links, it's kind of like an aw shucks, you clicked on it, but here is some training for you, a quick under 5-minute training. Many of them are interactive or video-based or poster, just depending. So people will be put into groups of you've clicked once, twice, 3 times, etc. And then also with that, we're training staff regarding protecting their student data. So like I said, student data is really powerful and has a lot of value, so we're training our educators and our support staff and administrators on what that really looks like to protect and secure student data. And then also, you guys will probably see coming soon, we're working on, we used to have an acceptable use policy, and now we really have a responsible use policy, so that'll be coming to your table soon, so stay tuned. So that is really where we're at a very high level view of where we're at with cybersecurity and data privacy.
Mr. President,
Yes, Rob?
you mentioned you test fish. How often do they bite?
It depends on what we push out. So each time is a little bit different. Our initial test when we did this for our first cybersecurity audit was over 25%. Clicked on it. We have gone down drastically since then. So by doing these phishing, you feel like a horrible person when you do this to people because no one gets into the job to trick people. But we have seen it go down. So after that, we got down to about 20%, then down to 18%. And so we're just seeing that drop more and more. Where we notice it's made a difference is that I get calls and emails every day. Jen, I got this email from you. Is this fake or is it real? Okay, well, like we want them to be calling and asking that or emailing. We just got one today from one of our leaders in the district saying, okay, this is a person I work with all the time, but I know that we paid them. Can you check on this email? And we have the ability to do that. So we're seeing that not only on the testing side, but also in our staff.
Very good. Thank you.
Any other board questions? All right. Well,
No, I just have a quick
Yes.
one. Can you comment on the James Johnson email wanting us to buy him Google credit cards or whatever it was? You know
Well,
about that one, don't you?
not that one specifically. We do know that, for all of you who are, it was me who did it.
it was a test.
I think I could, Sue, I think they target the most brilliant technology person on the board.
Yes,
See what they
yes.
can do from there.
Yes. So as you guys know, you are very public in our community. So, hackers are very smart. They know who holds the data. They know who can give power to some of that data. As board members who you are entwined not only in the community, but also deeply in our school district, they know that you have some confidential information, or they know that you have a Hudson School District account, but you might not be privy to all the training that we do for our staff. So they kind of know, they really know where to go to find information that way. So you guys have all been a part of many of those, so, yeah. So I can't comment on that one specifically, but we get the calls when it happens. I can tell you that. So, anything else?
Great. Well, thank you for your
Thank you
work
so
in that
much.
area. We appreciate being protected, so thank you. All right, I think we have our first agenda item came, so let's proceed to the recognition then.
All right, thank you. We're pleased to have Joey Rapoon, a fifth grader at Holton, with us this evening for recognition. Joey is the only student in Wisconsin to be the recipient of the 2019 Child Merit Award from the VSA Wisconsin Call for Arts. VSA is the state organization on arts and disability. Joey's work was done with watercolor and marker and is titled New York, New York. Along with his proud parents, Joey's art teacher, Cindy Gresmer, is with us this evening. And Cindy will tell us a little bit more about the selection process, and then we'll have time to talk to Joey. Why don't you both come up to the mic so you're both ready?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Did you have a question for us?
Cindy, will you just start with the selection process with the VSA? I mean, do you submit artwork to them and they go
I
through
have
the
been
jury?
submitting artwork to the VSA for over 10 years, and I mail it UPS and make sure it gets there timely. And this year, Joey and I had to work really hard. Joe came in several recesses, probably at least 5, Joe? Yeah, to get it finished. The due date was February 14th. And so we had so many cold days, snow days, interruptions, and I traveled to 2 schools. So to Holton on 2 days, and Joe came both days to work on his art, and we got it in on time, which is important. And it's a juried art show, so they have artists in Madison, Wisconsin, that jury the art show called Call for Art, and there's different judges every year, and that's part of the process. I mail it in, and they do the judging.
Okay. So Joey, tell us a little bit about your art. You must really like art. Is that true?
Yeah, sort of.
Sort of? Okay. So what made you think of drawing a picture of New York?
Well, it's about skyscrapers, the art project, and New York has always been known for its skyscrapers. So I decided to make some of the skyscrapers in New York City.
All right. And you can see if you look kind of to your, we have a picture of you with your art there. And then how did you decide to do watercolor and marker?
Well, that was part of the assignment, was to Sharpie some of the stuff and then paint it with watercolor.
Okay.
Do you want to describe some of your buildings?
So the tallest one in the background is the Freedom Tower, the one way in the back. The big brown one is the Empire State Building. The building to the left of that is just the random clock tower I drew. The building to the right of the Empire State Building is a Times Square building. Then there's the Chrysler Building.
And so where did you have to go all the way to Madison then for the award?
Yeah.
All right. And I understand your art's going to be exhibited so others can see it down in Madison for several weeks?
No, I took it back.
It was there for
Oh, yeah.
over a month. Since
Oh, and then he took
February.
it back
Yeah,
already.
until the celebration last Saturday.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
And
right.
what they really loved, the judges loved about Joe's work was whimsical faces on his buildings. And so it was inspired by James Rizzi, and he loves color and he loves whimsical. And so some of his things have very fun faces, and so Joe took off on that. And if you look at some of his, like his clock tower looks like it has a fun face on it, and they love that about his work.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Joe, I'm going to let you look back at the board members and just see if they have any other comments or questions for you.
Mr.
Yes.
President,
Rob?
Joey, I can tell why you won with the faces and the level of detail, all the windows and the smiles. It's really, really nice. How long did it take you to draw it and color it?
I don't know. A very long time. I
Very
guess.
long.
He probably has at least 10 hours of work in.
Yeah.
From sketch, what do you think, from the sketch when we first worked on it, learning about the artist James Rizzi, and then actually putting the time into painting. And Joe was very meticulous about painting his windows. Probably the windows took you a long time, don't you think? Yeah.
It's really good.
Any other questions for Joe?
Well, I guess I will say something or ask.
A resident
something.
artist, yes.
Well,
So-
I did have an opportunity last year when you got a different art room or a new art room
Yes.
at EP Rock that Principal Hamburg took me down there for a little tour of what was going on. So I'm glad you have a little more wiggle room for
Thank you.
doing your projects. But and then occasionally I get to see what's in the hallway. But I guess what I admire about this project is I know you wanted them to learn foreground, middle ground, background, all that kind of good art principles. But the idea of beginning with a known pop artist so that they can have a little inspiration and then you let them explore however they want to interpret. And I think that's very amazing.
Yeah, because
And,
it could be famous, it could have been famous
could've been-
skyscrapers,
could
but
been.
Joe took off on, or it could have been imaginary.
Right.
It could have been a combination, so
But
that makes it fun for them.
I do think do think, Joey, your design, I agree with Rob that your design is just very rich and you make it so much more interesting with the way you personalize those buildings and making them, have faces and personalities. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, Joey.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's always good to hear Hudson students doing well, and to be the only student in Wisconsin to get the award. That is amazing, so good job. All right, moving on, we have our monthly budget update. All right,
And now for a little left hemisphere.
All right, this is the monthly update, which you guys are all used to looking at and seeing. Just kind of a quick refresher, a couple things to point out. I think a few times we've talked about how this year in particular we have that large amount of fund balance, committed fund balance that we're going to use up towards a construction project. So you'll see some of our 10 fund as we're looking at those year-to-date expenses. It looks like percentage-wise we're a little bit under for the year, but that's taking into account that 3.5 million that we have yet to spend out of the 10 fund. So it looks like the 10 fund's a little bit lower as far as its tracking, but just a note to that. The first pages give you overall summaries of all of the funds, and then on the subsequent pages we go into more detail of 10 fund, or the 10 fund, which is our general fund and has the bulk of the school district expenses within it. And then each page, like we've talked about before, kind of gets more and more detailed as you go. As you go. And then at the end is kind of where we do that summary. I know we try to get this out and posted to board books so you guys can take a look at what some of those are, and then feel free to let us know if there's any questions or things along those lines. That last page kind of gives you a summary of some of those larger variances that we are seeing. Just kind of a quick refresher on some of that again. This is us trying to look at our budget year to date and how we're tracking compared to previous years. So it's kind of what it's showing you there. We've had a lot of different changes as far as account structures, which makes that report look a little more cumbersome right now. The one item that I will point out that doesn't always hit this report is our health insurance. I think we maybe talked just briefly about that at the last meeting. And that's one that we continue to watch that can swing pretty drastically week to week and month to month. We're tracking a little bit or over what we've typically seen in the past since we've been self-funded. So we're continuing to watch that. That is probably the largest area of concern at this point within the budget. A lot still has to happen with that as far as our year-end entries before we close out at June 30th. But that's probably the one that I would say is the most, has like the most of our attention at this point in time to review. So if there's any other questions you guys have, I'd feel free to answer those. Or if there's questions along the way, or if you haven't had a time, please feel free to reach out to myself or Tim, and be glad to get back to you.
Mark, could you touch on, I know Heather had emailed a question earlier about when we have the DPI account changes.
Absolutely, yep.
You know, and it shows that we're over budget in a lot of those areas. A lot of that has to do with the fact that they're new account numbers.
Absolutely, yep.
But is there a offsetting reduction in another area?
Yep, no, a good way to explain that too. So that summary page at the end, and just to kind of a quick review, we might not cover this in detail each time. That percent variance that we're showing you is really looking at our year-to-date variance in 17-18 compared to our year-to-date variance in 18-19. The dollar amount that's next to that is just kind of associated with what that variance is. So there isn't so much that there's an offsetting credit, but it's when we run that calculation, because it's comparing to 17-18 when there was just zeros or nothing in there, it basically shows like it's a large variance on this particular report. So that's why right now when some of these account changes happen, they kind of show on this report as a large variance, but those are large dollar amounts because there's really nothing to compare it to. So if you look at those overall budgets, it's not that we're over by that exact dollar amount. It's I think we spent a little time looking at some of those in more detail, and we're tracking more of where we would expect to be with some of those. They aren't over budget. I know Tim and I have talked a little bit based on the question we got, maybe to see if there's a different way we can maybe present this so it becomes a little more meaningful for you guys and doesn't create some of those misleading questions and things like that. So we're going to continue talking about that and see if there's a different way to, when those changes do occur, that we can display them or present them to you in a different format. It's a good question, though.
I noticed another couple that didn't see on the variance report before was
Yes.
safety grant expenses.
Correct, yep, yep.
And why don't you just touch on that real
Yep,
briefly?
and that's another great example. So when those hit, those are typically one-time expenses that hit. So when we're usually looking at this, we're kind of comparing our spend throughout the year. And then when you have those one large expenses that hit in one particular month, a lot of times it creates a variance because we wouldn't have spent anything last year related to the safety grant, but those are new expenses that are occurring this year. So again, it's not that they're over budget, it's just they've hit the budget at a particular point within the year. And those safety grants, obviously you guys are familiar with those. We have additional revenue that's going to come in and offset that expense. So that's not something either that's going to be an item that's over budget at the end of the year. Yep, that's a good question of how some of that stuff can hit the report.
Okay.
Mr. President?
Mr.
Yes,
President?
Bruce?
So, may not be the right time, and if it's not and you want to divert to a later time, that's okay. But just in terms of some of those funds from the middle school, was there ever a closure with the pool or next steps? And again, if you want to take that up at a later time, that's okay too. I didn't know if that's under consideration for budgetary purposes.
Well, as far as the funds go related to the middle school and high school, we're getting really close to giving you guys an end of the year or end of the project's final report to let you know how they both came in. The middle school came in. I think there's like we talked about account balance somewhere between $300,000 or $400,000 or somewhere around there. Is that right, Tim?
Yeah.
And part of it came in much less than that, but you remember we didn't sell the last $500,000 of the bonds, so it came off the middle school. The high school looks like it's tracking somewhere between $500,000 and $750,000 under budget, and so we'll have those finalized numbers as well, and then you'll be able to kind of decide what you want to do with those funds. The pool situation that we have going on. We did have a commissioning agent come out and commission the pool. We did find that somebody had gone and must have got up on a ladder or a lift and closed almost all of the fresh air ducts in the pool area. And so now with those open, they're doing new testing and things like that. So they'll be able to kind of evaluate. So it may be that the system's fine. It may be that we can handle a lot of things. It's that the fresh air that was supposed to be blowing into the space was not happening because almost all of the registers were closed.
We expect to have the report back from KFI in about a week.
So, and that's where we'll get the full. What I'm saying, that may not be the only issue, but that was one of the issues when they came out and commissioned it. And then if they have recommendations on, even with them open, if we're still not getting any type of air movement and things like that, then, you know, they also have an engineering firm on staff, or engineering people on staff, where they can make recommendations to change those things. But we will deal with the air quality as soon as it gets up and rolling.
Mr. President,
Okay.
Thank
Rob?
you.
didn't IEA confirm that they had outside air coming in? I mean, they're sitting right here when I thought they had said.
Yep, on some days they said, or the one day they said they had lots of outside air coming in, and another day they said they didn't have very much outside air coming in. Do you remember that? I mean, so it was kind of conflicting. So that's why we hired the same commissioning agent that we used to commission the high school, middle school, to come in and actually figure out what, you know, are things running as designed. And so, not 100% sure what was going on. And I don't know if there's, yeah, I don't know all the inner workings of it. I just know that we've had very good luck with KFI commissioning the high school. They've been very good, and we're going to follow the recommendations because they have a strong track record. Not that IEA doesn't, but IEA is primarily a testing outfit, not a commissioning agent. So once we get that, we'll be able to tell the board what they found, what they think we need to change, and about how much it's going to cost, and then you guys can make some decisions from there. So.
Rob, did you have any other comment or question on this budget update?
No.
Oh, okay, I thought sorry. And Heather, did you? Okay. All right, any other questions regarding the monthly budget update? And I know that we have a work session, you know, coming up, so that we won't be dealing with like the 2019-2020 budget until next would be like towards the end of June.
Probably the end of June, August. I mean, July, August. I mean, we're getting to the point where we don't have a real good indication from the legislature as to even what they're thinking. You know, the number I heard most recently from a legislative update that I got on Friday up at CISA was they're looking at maybe around 600 million in new funding for education. Where that comes will be a big piece, because one of the areas that we're pushing the hardest on is the special ed funding, because we have right now, is it 7.6 million, Tim? Is that right?
Right, yeah, we're budgeted to, budget is spent.
So we overspend in special ed about 7.6 million, so we have to transfer money from general fund over to the Fund 27. And so what they're talking about doing is funding more state funding to special ed, which then mean less fund transfer over. That would be one of our biggest gains as far as funding if that piece goes through, or a portion of that piece goes through. The governor originally called for 30% funding in the first year and 60% in the second year. Right now, it looks like it's probably going to make it out of joint finance, potentially at 25% funding the first year and 30% funding the second year. So not what we were hoping, but still much further along than we are right now. So.
All right. Very good. Thanks, Mark. All right, moving on to action items, and I'll entertain a motion for the consent agenda items, including the expenditures as stated in the motion. Somebody get the written motion? All right, it's right up there on the screen.
And I have
Sure.
in the April 22nd,
You want to pull the April
Agenda-
22nd minutes?
well, no, but there was just a typo. It's very minor, but line number 4, they misspelled Peg Schumacher's last name. It's
Okay.
not a big deal, but.
Peg Schumacher's last name.
Line 4, again, it's very, very small, but.
All right. And we always, I think, want to try and make sure that we're accurate, so we'll have a correction of that. But pending that, is there a motion for the consent?
Well, while we're correcting in line 7, there's just an extra letter in the word resources, or in item 7, in those same minutes. There we go.
With that, I'll move the approval of the consent items, and that the chief financial and operations officer be authorized to pay bills in the amount of $3,957,760.26, pending the other changes and corrections to the spelling.
Second.
All right. We have a motion, a second, to approve the consent items. There is no discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And the consent items are approved. Moving on
Oh,
to.
Mr. President, if I
Yes.
may quickly, we do have a retirement. It was a later retirement of Liz Hovland, math teacher at the Hudson Middle School, and she has 30 years of service in the district, so just wanted to recognize her.
Okay. Yes, definitely 30 years, that's a long time, and but we wish her well and thank her for her service. Now, I guess the next agenda item would be the first reading of Personnel Policy Series 500. This was discussed and covered at our last work session on April 22nd. And as you know, we approve these personnel policies. We're driving through the different 100 series. 500 is human resources. And so there's some that are very minor changes, some are completely new, and others have some substantial revisions, but all with rationale that was explained in the work session. And is there a motion to approve the first reading?
Mr. President?
Yes.
I move to approve the first reading of Series 500.
And just to clarify, this is not the complete 500 series?
No, it's part 5, and we'll have one more part before we're complete next
Right.
month.
Because I thought that we've been on the 500 series for a while here, so.
Yes,
About a
we
year.
have.
About a
Yeah.
year.
But, yeah, some of these policies, again, hadn't been updated since 1990, quite a few changes. Biggest area is always in the area of technology, where things were still being done by hand or paper and so forth, so. Is there any further discussion regarding approval of the first reading? And as we had explained, I also want to clarify for our viewers who are watching the meeting that there's obviously some new changes. We're trying to stay consistent with state statute, which surprisingly, the legislature seems to always want to change a few things, and when they do, we have to stay consistent with state statute, so that necessitates changes as well. But board members always have the opportunity for reviewing these in detail and bringing out questions to administration for not just during the work session, but in between meetings until actually this is approved on the second reading, which won't be until June meeting. But all right, with that, any other questions with regard to?
I might just
Yes.
say that I did have a question, and I asked Andrea earlier and got a perfectly fine answer. But it caused me to look up the word whistleblower, because I thought it might just be, only common here to use that term in the States. But anyway, for your interest, it was coined in 1970, so it's not really a very old
No,
word.
it's not.
So.
Apparently, they weren't blowing whistles before 1970, so.
Well, and it's actually referenced to referees when they blow on the whistle to
Yes.
indicate
Yep.
something that was illegal, so, anyway, for
absolutely.
whatever.
Thank
little-
you. I always like to learn something at these meetings, so thank you, Sue. The Cliff Clavin of the school board.
Little known fact.
But again, Andrea, thank you for your work on that. Because I don't want to minimize it. Alignment is really important because we're talking about our handbooks, which go out to employees and so those need to be in alignment with our policies, which need to be in alignment with state statutes. So this is a lot of work.
One quick note, too, we talked about this with TAC and the approach of using a handbook as the resource, as that primary resource, and they were very supportive. And they said, yep, that makes sense to have one document be the primary go-to. So just so you know, we have been talking with the teachers on that, and we'll roll it out comprehensively in August
All
with
right.
the new handbook.
Very good. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the first reading of the personnel policies, Part 5 of the 500 series, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes. Last up, we have on our action items is the 2019-2020 Board of Education dates. I note that, so we have basically, try to meet on the second Monday of every month for our action meeting and the fourth Monday for our work session. Those are adjusted depending on availability and conflicts with really important matters. So I note that I have a conflict and will not be attending for sure on March 30th, because we moved that to the 5th Monday of March, and because the 4th Monday is the spring break this year is late for 2020, and I will not be in the country on March 30th, so plan on Bruce, I guess, running that meeting.
I hope I'm here.
Yeah, well, with that, is there any questions now on this calendar? And while the calendar does go into May and June, actually only technically the first Monday meeting would be part of this calendar because it always would be a subject to approval on May 11th of 2020 for the 2021 calendar. But we want to make sure folks see that, like, we're not meeting on Memorial Day. We're meeting the day after Memorial Day, so.
Mr. President,
Yes, Rob?
we have a meeting on June 17th, just out of curiosity, how come it's not the following?
As a conflict for Nick, he's not going to be in the district. And we have also start times with little asterisks in October. Our October 14 meeting is being moved up. And the work session that follows 2 weeks later, which happens to be the approval of our mill rate, that is going to be at 6 p.m. on the 28th. Because normally we have our action items at 6, and the mill rate's kind of an important one, so we're going to make sure that that's at 6, all right?
Rob, do you have a conflict on the, I'm only asking because I know 2 of us already do, and so I want to make sure that we have a forum on that meeting. Okay.
Okay.
We're curious then if you-
I'm going to be absent
That's that much.
June 17th, but
Do we want to move that meeting? Is there a better date? It's a work session, so if the majority of the board's not going to be, well, I mean, it'd be a majority, but if 3 people are going to be gone, then it starts to become less effective of a work session. So, do people have any other dates, or?
That's when.
I'm gone.
Yeah.
Like the week of the 24th.
You're gone that week?
And I don't know about moving it into July.
Yeah. So you will be. 'cause I
Okay,
thought
so we only have 1 board member missing on the 7th.
Rob, are you here on 17th?
I am.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah, no, and we're trying to accommodate people, so, I mean, if we do have a situation where we're gonna have 2 or 3, and that occasionally pops up during the school year, just so that, I mean, these dates, we try to, let the public know when we're meeting, but every once in a while, weather happens or whatever it might be, and it might need to be adjourned, but,
Just to point out, July as well is a 5th Monday. I mean, so there, as I was putting through my calendar, there are several
Yep.
throughout the year that are not 2nd and 4th, so just check your calendars.
And Tim should have invited, do you have these loaded, Tim, yet, or no? Not until, okay. So after tonight, then Tim will load it on your calendars for you and get them in there. You'll get the email with all these.
I think you did.
and, I don't know, somebody that's got a calendar handy, that November meeting, is that the Monday of, short week before Thanksgiving? It's,
I don't think so. I think I looked and it was early this year, I think. It's the 28th, so it's the week of Thanksgiving.
Is that gonna be a problem for anyone? 'Cause we can, we do have school Monday, Tuesday, yep. But if that's gonna be an issue, we can move. If you'd like it to supplant your Thanksgiving to, we could do that as well.
No, we move up the December meeting for, good purpose, good reason, but there's school the next day after that board meeting, so. All right. I'll entertain a motion then to approve this calendar
moved.
as printed. We got a motion, a second. Any further discussion on the 2019-2020 Board of Education meeting schedule, which Tim Minor pointed out doesn't have 4 columns this year like last year's board meeting calendar with between boundary meetings and construction meetings. We're back down to 2 columns. So with that clarification, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, the 2019-2020 meeting calendar is approved. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second.
It's been moved in second. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, we are adjourned.